According to Muslims, the Quran is the literal dictated words of God. Because of this belief, those who adhere to it ascribe the Quran with infallibility and maximal reverence. However, if there are errors in the Quran, then the narrative about it being the dictated words of God falls apart, as no Muslim believes God can make a mistake in his eternal word. Many object to the Quran on the basis of scientific errors, or on the basis of historically false claims, or on the basis of copying myths. These, while some are indeed problematic, are not conclusive. A Muslim can always interpret Surah 1886 to mean the sun only appeared to set in a muddy pool. A Muslim can always claim all the earliest historical documents are mistaken, not the Quran. A Muslim can always claim the reason stories from the Quran were found in prior myths is because the myths initially recorded the events accurately, but then got corrupted, and the Quran came along to set the record straight. In almost all cases with the errors in any religious text, its adherents can always find a way around while remaining at least somewhat logically and internally consistent. But this isn't true for one thing, the Quran's own argumentation. If the Quran makes a clearly logically flawed argument, then it is very hard to find a way to save it. Clearly bad logic is hard to reinterpret, can't be made allegorical, and can't resort to throwing other sources under the bus to save its own skin. The only way to avoid the conclusion would be to not comprehend logic and/or how the passage violates it. But does the Quran make such bad arguments? Here are 5 examples that fail logically. In Surah 2, Ayah 23, the Quran claims that because nobody can meet the challenge of creating a surah like it, that therefore it's from God. First of all, telling someone, if you can't make something like what I made, then whatever I made must be from God, is a huge jump in logic and doesn't follow at all, obviously. Second of all, this challenge is completely subjective with no criteria being explained in the Quran itself anywhere or even in the Hadith. Thus, Muslims have come up with their own criteria as to what makes something like the Quran, and disagree with each other constantly about them. Therefore, since it is undeniably subjective, it is impossible to objectively meet the requirements, even though there are no requirements listed, because we don't even know what the challenge is, and it has no objective criteria. This is the Quran's own problem, as it is the root cause of there being no criteria, as it never gave any. It never specified what it even means by making a surah like it, and therefore presents a bad argument, being a subjective one, for its truthfulness. Also, since Muslims made up all the rules for this challenge, they have decided they are the ones to judge whether an attempt to meet the challenge is successful. Imagine if Christians said, no one can make a book like the Bible, and we constantly said that nobody has met this challenge, and that therefore the Bible is from God. And any time you or anyone else tried to meet the challenge, we just said, it's not beautiful enough, or it doesn't sound like the Bible. This challenge is designed to be vague, which again points to the challenge's weakness. The second example is going to be from Surah 4, Ayah 82, which claims that because the Quran doesn't have any contradictions, it must be from God. But just because a book isn't from God doesn't mean it's guaranteed to have many contradictions, and this is true for holy books as well. There's nothing logically inconsistent about someone writing a book that doesn't contradict itself. But this verse says that if it were not from God, then the Quran would have contradictions, which is not true necessarily, therefore making this argument false. The next one being from Surah 6, Ayah 101, which says that Allah is the originator of the heavens and earth. How could he have a child when he has no mate? He created all things and has perfect knowledge of everything. This verse asserts that Allah would need to have a mate in order to have children. Let's assume Allah is referring to children from him and is excluding adoption and metaphor here. It does not follow that just because Allah doesn't have sex, that therefore he can't have a son in a true sense. That still leaves the options of producing asexually, as it is not logically incoherent, and the Christian concept of eternally begetting or generating. The fourth bad argument is from Surah 21, Ayah 22, which says, had there been any other gods besides Allah in the heavens or the earth, both realms would have surely been corrupted. So glorified is Allah, Lord of the throne, far above what they claim. This verse assumes that the heavens and earth would have been corrupted if there were multiple gods, but this doesn't follow at all. Why is this the case? because they would disagree with each other? That isn't necessarily true. What if these powerful beings have a similar goal? It isn't necessary that in every hypothetical situation they have to corrupt the heavens and the earth. And even if they did have a battle of some kind, why would we assume that their battle would affect both the heavens and the earth and corrupt them permanently? None of this follows from multiple gods by necessity. This verse assumes something like a Greek pantheon, which is practically humans with superpowers, but a pantheon of gods with an identical ultimate goal would fit the description of this verse about multiple gods, but without the result of the heavens and the earth being corrupted. And the last example being from Surah 21 again, but this time Ayah 30, and it says, "Do the disbelievers not realize that the heavens and the earth were once one mass? Then we split them apart, and we created water from every living thing. Will they then not believe?" Ignoring the scientific errors in this passage and only looking at its argumentation, the Quran says that disbelievers should believe because they should realize Allah split the heaven and the earth apart and made everything that lives from water. First of all, assuming all disbelievers were aware the heaven and the earth were split apart after having once been joined, that doesn't mean they should assume Allah did it. Maybe a different God from a different religion did, and that's what they believe. Even if they think God is the one who did this, and assuming they believe this event even happened, that doesn't mean they should believe Islam.